So before we go into texturing layers of detail, I wanted to do the basic texturing first, just to show how to apply that within the node system. So first thing I do is I single out the wall by pressing Shift H, and when we press viewport render, it looks grayed out. So I like to add a HDRI to this. So you go to your shader editor, and then on this section you go from object to world, Shift A, search environment texture, open, and then you just have a couple of textures that I found online. HDRI Haven has some amazing textures, so look that up. And then I'm going to choose Kloppenheim 3. Plug it in. So the reason why you don't see it is if you go to film, I put it on transparent, but without you can see it, and then just like to have it on transparent, so just so I can focus on the wall itself. So the first thing I do is I put this down, and this is usually what I do for every single part of the texturing process. I just add a light, a point light, put them somewhere around here, make it a bit stronger, maybe 30, bit bluish, something like this. And the reason I do this is just so I can see the reflection on the wall. And the cool thing about this is if you figured out the texturing of the wall by singling out first, then once you single out the wall and texture it based on how it responds to this point light, it will respond correctly to any light you add later on to your scene. So you've already figured out how the light is going to hit it without, having a complex scene first and then figuring out while you're having this complex scene. It's just saving us a lot of time. All right, so let's start. So first thing we do is press this, press a plus, new material, that's a Principled BSDF. And I downloaded a couple of textures on Megascan. So I implore you guys to check Megascan and see if you can find some textures that would be useful for your image. So the first thing I do is, I think I have a couple of textures here. Yes, this one is the one that I like. Obviously, I took my time finding these textures just to save time. All right, looks good so far. Control T. And just a quick heads up, if you press Control T and it doesn't work, that's because you have to activate this, go to Preference and then Add On. Type in Node Wrangler and then plug this button on. I don't know why it's not automatically plugged in, but yeah. So far so good. And also a cool heads up, I finally got my RTX 3090, so very helpful just to save us time in the render viewport. All right, so far so good. I just like to put this on box and then put it on generate. And what this does is, if you put it on a flat plane, I usually keep it flat, and you put it on a box and you have some shapes and stuff in it, it sometimes morphs the in-betweens. So I'd like to put it on box just to see. Just maybe sometimes it works with flat, so just try out both, see which one works the best for you. So all right, so far so good. First thing we do is we're going to add a roughness map. We're going to put it to non-color, and the reason why I do this is everything outside of the albedo texture, so the default texture, should be in non-color. Only the default texture should be on sRGB. With this, I mean choosing color data versus non-color data determines whether or not Blender will color manage your image. All right, so you add a color ramp and then you plug in the color ramp into roughness. The color ramp node is used for mapping values to color with the use of a gradient. first thing I do is I press Control Shift and then left mouse click. And the thing about roughness is everything that's black. Oh, I forgot to change these two. Plug it in. So the thing about roughness is everything that's black is going to be reflective and everything that's white is not going to be reflective. So what I'm looking for right now is a strong contrast between the black and the whites. So again, Control Shift, Principled BSD to go back, and now you see there's reflection. But as you noticed, wall doesn't reflect like this, right? Concrete wall. So what we do is, there's multiple ways. First thing you can do is just push it back. But what I like to do is having the contrast, but yet less reflective. So by doing that, what we do is just push this back, you see? So this is like, because the further it goes to white, the less reflective it is, your black. So this is a very cool tool, actually, the color ramp. This makes you have a lot of control on the reflections. So there's another thing that we can do, right? Let me just make it a bit darker. All right, object. So going back to this, we're gonna add another color ramp. And you know, usually with textures, when you download them, you get like a specular map, a roughness, albedo, blah, blah, blah. But the thing about Blender is the more textures you put in, the heavier the memory is and the heavier your scene is going to be. So you have to be smart with this, right? So what I do usually is I just plug it into the roughness. Yes. And then put it in a specular map. And what I do is I just flip the color ramp. And this is actually the opposite of roughness. So everything that's white is going to be reflective and everything that's black is going to be non-reflective. And this is for your specular parts. So I'm just trying to find like strong contrast and see what happens. Look, like this we can see it better. You see that? So even within that we can have like contrast. Just make it a bit. You know, if you're not sure how it's going to look like, just go back into the texture map by pressing Control Shift and left mouse click. You see there's contrast here as well. And again, with this one, we can just push it down so that it's not as strong as something like maybe this. And you know, like just to save time, usually I don't spend this much time on the specular. Look, without, looks like this. Just put it down a bit. Looks like that. And then when we plug in the specular map, it looks like this. So it's just an option, but I like the contrast within the lighting. All right, so far so good. So let's just make these smaller, and then the next phase is the normal map. For the normal map, again, non-color. Don't forget to put it on box. Everything has to be similar. For the normal map, if I plug it in like this, it's going to look like this. It doesn't work like that. You have to have a normal map in between. So what you do is you plug it in here, you go to normal, voila. Even though it's a bit too strong, so what we do is we're just gonna push it back a bit further. Something like this, you know, subtlety is your friend. All right, So we have the normal map, we have the roughness, the specular, and we have the albedo texture. So another cool part that we can do is we're going to add a displacement map. And in later videos, I'm going to show you another way of doing displacement, but this is just one way. We're going to add displacement. Again, plug it in, make it a box, color it into height map. Ooh. That looks good. Just play around with the scale. Maybe something like 1 point. No, it's a bit too strong. 0.7, something like this. But for it to be able to work, maybe some of you guys don't see it, just have to go into your texture folder. So your material properties, and then you go to surface, and then you see bump only, but we want to see the bump and the displacement. All right. So this is just the basic way of texturing a wall. In the next phase, I'm going to show you how to delve deeper into texturing this wall.